Welcome. My name is Stephanie, and today we're going to be starting a new series on my channel called the TBR Rewind. And this is where I tackle my TBR list from oldest to newest. So first up, we have No Great Mischief by Alistair MacLeod. This was added in May of 2013. I don't even think I knew Goodreads existed in 2013, but regardless, this was the first book on my list. And let me read you a blurb about it. In 1779, Callum MacDonald set sail in exile from the Highlands of Scotland with his wife and 12 children, along with the dog who would not be left behind. After a catastrophic crossing, he landed in the new world of Cape Breton, by which time he had become a widower and a grandfather. 200 years later, another MacDonald tells his story of coming of age as part of the Clan Callum Riuda, my Gaelic, not good, in that same beautiful Cape Breton landscape. By turns epic and intimate, this is an astonishing storytelling informed by tradition and perfected by an exceptional craftsman. So that's what we'll be getting into this week. Well, I'm not sure how long it'll take me. It's only 283 pages, so it shouldn't take too long, and I'll take you along on my journey, and let's see where we go. And we're back. And I have finished No Great Mischief by Alistair MacLeod. So this novel follows Alexander MacDonald. He's a successful orthodontist living in Ontario, but despite his professional success, his life is pretty shaped by his past, especially with his relationship to his older brother Callum. So the main characters in the story are Alexander. He has a twin sister and 3 older brothers. But the most prominent older brother is indeed Callum, and his sister also plays a fairly minor role. So the story moves back and forth between present day and flashbacks, all told from the perspective of Alexander, and they gradually reveal the history of the MacDonald family. So the family is originally from Cape Breton with a lot of strong Scottish and Highland roots. So as children, Alexander and Callum and the other siblings lose their parents in a tragic accident. So they're raised by their grandparents, but from early on, their paths take a very different turn. So Callum and the 2 older brothers work more physically demanding jobs and all struggle with alcoholism, whereas Alexander and his sister take the more college traditional education pathway and become more successfully professionally. There's also a fairly large age gap between the 3 older brothers, Alexander and his sister. At the beginning of the novel, you're introduced to Alexander, who is going to visit Callum. In this, I think there's some really interesting imagery that the book portrays, where Alexander describes walking into these nondescript buildings with nondescript doors and nondescript hallways where anyone can come and go. Their furniture doesn't belong to them. They essentially have nothing, and they just float back and forth between these different apartments. Almost all of the buildings, though, have a wooden stairway that leads steeply up to a hall lit by a yellow 40-watt bulb. And along this hallway, and sometimes along other hallways above it, are the people who live above the street-level stores. Contrary to the myth, few of the people who live here are the owners of the stores beneath them. They are instead people who do not own much of anything. Generally, even their furniture, such as it is not their own. And when they move, as they often do, they do not look in the yellow pages for any selection of moving companies. It is into such a doorway that I turn now, leaving the sun behind me on the street, and it is such a stairway that I climb towards the hallway above. This is the 3rd time that he has lived at this address in recent years, circling back and making agreements with the landlord for whom he, at one time, did some work as a handyman. So this is how we are introduced to Callum, who is in the throes of alcohol withdrawal. So he is shaking and trembling so badly that he can't even stand, and his brother ends up having to go get him some alcohol just to be able to converse with him and to interact with him at all. During the first few stories at the beginning, the novel is sort of building towards the present, where Callum is in serious decline, and Alexander is forced to confront his responsibility towards his brother, his connection to his family, and what it means to truly belong to a family and to a place. So the major themes in this book, I would say, are certainly family loyalty versus individual success. So one of the main tenets of the story, it takes place right after Alexander has graduated college, and they have celebrated. Another member of the family who works in the mining company where his older brothers work has had an accident and is no longer able to work there. So the mining company needs the same number of men to do the job. His older brothers and his family essentially guilt Alexander into joining into the mining company instead of, at that time, going on to pursue dental school. So he does end up working at the mine for a while with his brothers. I think that brings him a little bit closer to his brothers, and something ultimately happens within his time there that changes the dynamic of the family a bit. At the heart of the novel, there is this tension of Alexander to want to lead a better life, but staying loyal to his family and his root. He tries to escape by going to college, but he never really fully escapes. And whereas Callum never is able to get out of the same sort of cycle that the rest of the family and the brothers are in, and he ultimately does pay a price for being in this situation. Another theme is clearly alcoholism and the destruction and devastation that this causes to the individual and the family. There is another quote early on in the book when Alexander is visiting Callum. He relinquishes the doorknob completely and staggers backwards until he falls in a jangling sitting position upon the protesting springs of the unmade bed. When his hands are removed from the doorknob, they shake violently. But now, sitting on the edge of the bed, he places them on either side of him and holds the bed frame still. He hangs onto it fiercely until his huge and broken knuckles whiten, and then finally his trembling hands are stilled. As long as I have something to hang on to, he says, swaying back and forth, I am okay. That was poignantly sad for me to read. It has dual meanings. Obviously, physically, he needs something to hold on to. But I think emotionally, just having Alexander in his life is really causing him to hold on to whatever scraps of existence that he feels he still has. and to hold on to his life. So I thought that was a very well written, a very emotional sentence. Other themes in the book, masculinity. So most of the characters in this book are men's men. So they do a lot of physical labor. They don't talk about their emotions at all. It's really more about sacrifice, endurance, loyalty to family, loyalty to your friends, at any cost. So there is always this undercurrent emotion that is going to explode to the surface, but it is going to explode generally in a negative way because the feelings are never dealt with until they get to that point. And there are a couple of stories within here that do show when that emotion rises to the point of negativity and bad things happening and what the consequences are. There's also themes of guilt and responsibility. So Alexander does feel an incredible amount of guilt for his success, for having eventually left his brothers behind and to have his own life, and then feeling like he isn't doing enough for them. And this guilt drives much of the emotional weight of the story. Callum and his brother at one point go back to visit where their parents' accident was. Callum is remarking, "I often think it is ironic that our father came through the war unscathed, only to die beneath the ice at the end of a sunny March day." "Yes," I said, "if you had been with them, you would have gone down too." "I look at it differently," he said. "If I had been with them, I might have saved them." So showing you the guilt not only that Alexander is living with, but also that his brother Callum is living with and feeling responsible for not doing enough to save his parents. When they visited the site of their parents' accident a little bit earlier on when they were younger and their grandparents were still alive, they had taken a boat out to the lighthouse island and had carved their parents' names on the rocks there, and they were coming back. "Well," said Grandpa, "there's lots of beer here. Why don't you drink some of this? It will help you to forget." "They didn't come all this way," said Grandfather quietly, "because they wanted to forget." Grandpa was silent for a while. "No," he said, "I guess they didn't." And showing they're having these emotional moments. They are trying to reconcile with what they feel about their parents' death. It's just they are limited in their capacity to do so. And so what No Great Mischief, as the title of the book really stands for, is expendability of men. There's a quote that says, so his sister had been doing some research into their family and into the wars and the battles that their family had been in. And she comes across a letter where one of the commanders was talking about the men that were about to go into this attack. "The French in front of them and Wolfe in the boats behind them, and their wounded on the Beauport shore. They didn't know about his earlier letter describing them. I still remember some of the phrasing. They are hardy, intrepid, accustomed to a rough country, and no great mischief if they fall." Reiterating that the men that are coming to fight these battles were expendable in some people's eyes. Really relates strongly to the family in this book and how some of the brothers are viewed as expendable and, oh, that's just what happens to this family and they're just alcoholics and, their lives aren't meaningful. Whereas Alexander and his sister have gone on to be more traditionally professional, and so therefore do their lives have more meaning. So I think what makes No Great Mischief a good book and powerful is its subtlety. There's no dramatic plot twist. There's no real plot in general. It's just very much a retrospective on their life and the stories that Alexander remembers about him and his brothers. But it's very emotional. It's a very character-driven story. It's very simple language, but strong imagery. I think hopefully you've seen in some of the quotes that I've read. It asks a difficult question that, is success worth it if you feel that it costs you your connection to your home? And does it need to? Can people go on different routes in their lives and still be connected back at the root of who they are? I think some of the downfalls of the book for me was it was very rooted in masculinity and the story of the men in this family. I just didn't relate to it as much as I think I would potentially if it had incorporated more of the sister's perspective and maybe more of the grandmother's perspective as well. I ended up giving No Great Mischief 3.5 stars. So the next book on the TBR Rewind list is Stephen King's The Outsider. So this I added to my list back in April of 2019. I have read several Stephen King. I do enjoy him. I think this will be kind of a nostalgic read for me in terms of just the genre and his writing style. It's a lot chunkier than I realized, so it might take me a little bit to get through this. Stay tuned if you like this breakdown and like enjoying exploring my TBR from bottom to top. Feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.